Joel McLean and Norman Wooten, magnetic resonance amplifier. On December 12, 1994, Joel McLean and Norman Wooten, two Dallas inventors, discovered that a magnetic resonance amplifier could be capable of over-unity gain energy conversion. The electrical output of their prototype was 5 times the electrical input. They made a point of publicizing their invention as widely as possible via the internet right away so as to forestall possible suppression. Since then, they have authored articles on the magnetic resonance amplifier in Electrifying Times, Extraordinary Science, and New Energy News. A personal friend of Newt Gingrich became very interested and arranged for the physics department at Georgia Institute of Technology to experiment with it. They were able to increase the gain so that the output is 18 times the input. Since they could not explain this according to conventional physics, they refused to publish their results for fear of losing the respect and esteem of their peers. Gingrich had been following the MRA with keen interest, so when his friend told him of the problem with Georgia Tech, Gingrich arranged for the federal funding of Georgia Tech programs to be cut off. The president of Georgia Tech, who had been in the dark on all this, began getting phone calls from enraged Georgia Tech professors. Then the physics department published their findings. At the International Tesla Society Symposium in Colorado Springs, July 20 to 23, McLean and Wooten gave a lecture on their magnetic resonance amplifier. The oscilloscope waveforms of output versus input they showed were very odd. They sort of loop around themselves. A few days after the conference, Wooten's 2-year-old boy had been abducted. Wooten was running for his life in Canada, and McLean was in hiding. The magnetic resonance amplifier's claimed over-unity power conversion efficiency was later shown to be a measurement error. However, a past issue of Electrifying Times claims that Scott McKee has invented a solid-state over-unity electrical energy converter with an input of 15 volts, 0.438 amperes, 7.25 watts, and an output of 34 volts, 127 amperes, 4318 watts. McKee's converter apparently is a more advanced version of the magnetic resonance amplifier. Stefan Marinov, magnetic vortex hyperionization device. At his death, Dr. Stefan Marinov was assistant professor of physics at Sofia University, a member of the Physical Institute of the Bulgarian Academy of Science, and the editor of Deutsche Physik. One energy device he was developing was an over-unity magnetic motor. http://www.spiritofmaat.com/archive/march2/bearden.htm discloses the strange circumstances of Marinov's death. The excerpt below, with editing, is from Venceslav Bujic's report published January 14, 2002. Stefan Marinov was working on his magnetic vortex hyperionization device just 1 month before his sudden, unexpected death. There is high chance that his death was connected to the testing of this device, and that it was not a suicide as officially stated. Marinov was a good Christian and nobody expected him to commit suicide. According to official news, he presumably jumped off from the top of the 4-level outside emergency staircase of the Bibliothek in Graz, Austria. But nobody actually saw him jumping off. He was still alive, not even bleeding, when an ambulance and police arrived. Marinov died on the way to a hospital. The police never notified anybody, including his son in Bulgaria. They sealed his apartment, not letting anybody inside, and also refused to release any letters found there, and refused to give any information. Stefan Marinov was born in Bulgaria. When he got a passport, he moved to Washington. Secret agencies and their elite bosses, who control sources of energy and are confusing people, wouldn't let Marinov alone when he went back to Europe, this time to Italy and Austria. These are the same people who prevented Tesla and many others from giving to all the people sources of free energy. His life was ended abruptly. He had big plans for the future and was making various future collaborations. Marinov had planned to attend the International Physics Conference in Köln, Germany, on 25th of August 1997. He had big plans for the future and was making various future collaborations. Marinov had planned to attend the International Physics Conference in Köln, Germany, on 25th of August 1997. He even had made hotel reservations for the conference for him and his colleague Professor P.T. Pappas from Athens, Greece. Bob Aldrich, reporter, vibrating energy source. By lamentations I mean lamenting on how difficult it's been to get free energy made available to the people at large. How many people have tried to make it possible over the years? Must have been thousands. Who has succeeded? Say, did you ever hear of a device that farmers were using possibly 50 years ago that worked on vibration? Apparently some very simple device that when set to vibrating, would put out ample free energy. Chicken farmers and such were building them and using them to power the ranch. Until some 1 or 2 farms mysteriously blew up or burned to the ground, after some warnings. This was in the Midwest to my recollection. The fellow who told me did mention specifics, but it was several years ago. He was very hard to pin down as he was always onto the latest thing and didn't want to talk about things in the past much. Jim Powell, reporter, flywheel/dual hydraulic cylinder. A friend just forwarded your 25-page e-article entitled History of New Energy Invention Suppression Cases, and I enjoyed the reading. Amazing stuff. There was one machine, for lack of a better term, I saw back in the mid-70s that has haunted the back of my mind ever since, and I looked for a mention of it in your article. The article hints you have much more information and files elsewhere. Thought I would share with you what I recollect in case you already know about the contraption I witnessed. During the mid-70s I was a long-haul trucker and met an older man at a truck stop in Tennessee. Over cups of coffee we were talking about motors and diesel and mechanical things in general when he mentioned a buddy of his had invented a perpetual motion machine that he thought was pretty interesting. I asked where it was and could I see it. He said the guy didn't live too far from where we were sitting, but I would never be able to get my rig up the mountain. He offered to give me a ride. He was right. This buddy lived back in the hills, and in Tennessee that can mean a mouthful. Good thing his truck was 4-wheel drive. When we got there, his buddy was rather evasive about the whole thing, which really puzzled the guy that brought me up there. So he kept asking and pushing for a demo, and finally the inventor told us the day before some guys had visited and took a part or two and told him to not fix it or they would be back. I got the feeling that if it had been just me there, he wouldn't have told me anything or showed me anything, but because his friend was with me it was different. He took us out back where there were odds and ends on a workbench, and he quickly gave me a brief explanation of how the parts fit together and how it worked. I am sorry for your sake that I haven't remembered any names of the individuals, so if you want to toss my email it is okay. Here is how the description went. Flywheels by their character tend to develop power once they are in motion and can generate more power while spinning than they consume to keep spinning. Sounds interesting, but I am no physics wizard. So he had rigged a big flywheel between 2 double-acting hydraulic cylinders with the appropriate switches triggered by the rams to keep the 2 cylinders reciprocating as long as there was a steady supply of hydraulic oil pressure. The hydraulic oil pressure came from what looked like a modest-sized power steering pump which was driven by the flywheel. The flywheel was kept in motion by the moving cylinders, and the cylinders in turn were kept in motion by the switches and the fluid pump. The fluid pump was kept in motion by the flywheel. The switches and support for the flywheel, bearings, was taken during the confiscation by his unpleasant visitors. To start the whole thing in motion he had a small electric motor to help start spinning the flywheel. Once it got up to a certain RPM the electric motor was disengaged and shut down. They both told me how he had been using it for various power needs around the farm, from pumping water to cutting wood, for over a year. When someone told him he should seek a patent for his machine, he followed that advice. Instead of getting a patent, he got the visit the day before I arrived. I didn't feel like they were pulling my leg, but again I know nothing of physics, and I was in my early 20s. There was no appeal to partner, contribute money or support or anything that would have made me suspicious. Wish I could have seen it working because it has kept me wondering the past 30 years. Perhaps you have heard of these things and can comment on whether it was bunk or not. You may even have the scientific knowledge to instantly recognize its possibility or improbability. Anyway, after reading your article I thought I would pass this along for what it is worth. This writer, Gary Vesperman, does not know of any similar device in the unconventional science literature. Perhaps one of my genius scientist friends can figure out this energy invention. Gosh, do the energy invention suppression bullies even track down energy inventors in remote hillbilly country, take away or damage their machines, and threaten them with death? Canadian scientist, standalone water-based electricity generator. Gene Manning authored The Coming Energy Revolution and also has co-authored Suppressed Inventions and Other Discoveries, an anthology put together by Jonathan Eisen. She has heard numerous stories of suppression during 25 years of investigating non-conventional energy inventions. Her website is http://www.changingpower.net. New Energy Congress member Leslie R. Pastor's review of Eisen's anthology. The book is breathtaking in its openness regarding actual suppression of real-time inventors and innovators. One story she told Gary Vesperman is about a Canadian scientist. In October of 1999, Manning met him through a mutual friend. According to her notes, he had invented an energy device which was the size of a refrigerator when he ran his home on its electrical output. He wouldn't reveal how it worked, except that it involved sound frequencies, copper plates, water, a transformer and a battery and could be built the size of a Walkman. Vesperman, this device appears to be similar to the super-efficient water electrolysis devices developed by Daniel Dingel, Ken Rasmussen, and Stanley Meyer, see above. Notice that it offers the desirable feature of being scalable from very small to at least big enough to run a house off the power grid. It also functions as a standalone generator, not as a less desirable over-unity power converter. His mistake had been in being confrontational. He called officials at Ontario's hydroelectric utility and told them to take their meter off of his house. When they arrived and cut off his power, he went down into his basement. While the officials stood out in his yard, the lights inside his house went on again. He came outside and bragged, "I'll put you out of business in 6 months." Soon he was visited by men wearing Royal Canadian Mounted Police uniforms who gave him warnings and a document. He later showed the document to his son, a lawyer, who reinforced the message, "Keep your mouth shut." He dismantled his inventions. He told Manning that the Royal Canadian Mounted Police basically told him to forget about his invention for 30 years. 26 of those years had passed. He said the police kept an eye on his activities throughout the years. For instance, they interrogated him after an innocent business meeting in California which had nothing to do with the invention. This German-Canadian scientist joined the many inventors who took their energy secrets to the grave. He was elderly, and Manning believes he died from natural causes. Extremely low frequency, ELF, weapon. Much of this technology has been perfected on the 4th level of the CIA underground Dulce facility in the New Mexico desert. The 4th level of this underground base deals with technological aspects of human aura research, dream manipulation, hypnosis, telepathy and advanced mind control. The ELF weapon sucked the life out the victim's body, and Warwick literally fell asleep on his feet. The suspected assassin was followed out of the auditorium by a quick-thinking woman who then observed him laughing as he proudly reported his murderous deed on his cell phone. Sources: http://www.amplifloridaair.co.uk, http://www.thetruthseeker.co.uk/article.asp?id=5337, and http://www.thetruthseeker.co.uk/article.asp?id=5290 right parenthesis. Idaho inventor, advanced zero-point energy device. During the FBI siege at Ruby Ridge, Idaho, where the FBI shot to death a mother and child during a standoff concerning alleged illegal firearms, an inventor happened to be living and working on an advanced zero-point energy device in northern Idaho. During the FBI siege at Ruby Ridge, Idaho, where the FBI shot to death a mother and child during a standoff concerning alleged illegal firearms, an inventor happened to be living and working on an advanced zero-point energy device in northern Idaho. The day before the investor arrived, two U.S. government agents broke into the home, thinking that both inventor X and his wife were away. As it happened, however, X's wife was still home and very familiar with the use of her hefty handgun. She held the agents at bay inside the house, while debunking their story that they were cable TV repairmen checking out the lines. Had it not been for the siege at Ruby Ridge that day, who knows what else might have happened there. Excerpted with permission from Eric Masson's article Suppression from Higher Up. Inventors beware. The Deadly Campaign Against Free Energy Devices, Electrifying Times, Volume 8 Number 3 and also in http://www.electrifyingtimes.com/ericmassonsuppression.html. Joseph Newman, Energy Machine. In the news some years ago was Joseph Newman's energy machine. While Reagan stalled on acid rain, and Hodel pushed offshore drilling, the U.S. Patent Office continued to block commercial development of this latest of many government-smothered free energy devices. Newman sued the Patent Office for refusing to grant his machine a patent, in violation of its own regulations and the advice of the expert they chose to examine the device. They also issued false statements to the press about the invention's workability. Over 30 respected electrical engineers, physicists and technical experts have endorsed Newman's machine and signed affidavits confirming his claim of greater energy output than external energy input. 10 congressmen have introduced bills which would require Newman's patent be granted. As the Newman battle heated up, President Reagan appointed Donald Quigg, a 30-year Phillips Petroleum executive, to head the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. The judge entrusted with the case, Thomas P. Jackson, has violated judicial procedure, ignored expert testimony and ordered Newman's prototype confiscated and destroyed. During Watergate, Jackson was the attorney for John Mitchell and the committee to re-elect the president's corrupt finance division. Newman identified the gyroscopic properties of subatomic particles and built a unique arrangement of coils and magnets to draw energy directly from them, thus converting almost immeasurably small amounts of the machine's mass into energy. Theory and device are detailed in The Energy Machine, $38.45 including postage, from Joseph Newman Publishing Co., Route 1, Box 52, Lucedale, Mississippi 39452, 601-947-7147. Free press releases and brief technical descriptions are also available, send SASE. Newman's claims and theories do not seem to be universally accepted among mainstream physicists and engineers. Gary Vesperman. Bill Jenkins, reporter, Free Energy Machine. Bill Jenkins, Free Energy Machine. Live on Something's Happening. Audio cassette number A1008. $99. Bill Jenkins hosted the ABC Radio Open Mind program for 7 years, the most popular program in the country in its time slot. He dealt with New Age topics and was taken off the air. Here he discusses the program and his adventures since, including a near arrest on treason charges for preparing to market a free energy machine. Johnny A. Dotto, anti-aging and anti-gravity thermionic couple. Dave, there was an effects. The last one was, of course, the one he speaks of as far as Italian researcher. Actually he had a PhD, who did research on how magnetic fields affected the body. He made about 3 or 4 classifications of magnetic type energy fields. 2 were bad, 1 had some health benefits but in the long run had detrimental research goes. This person's name was Johnny A. Dotto, born in Venice. His main area of research was biophysics. Anyways, he built something that resembled a thermionic couple. It also levitated too. I said his name was, he's dead, murdered some time back. His device worked really well as far as curing cancer goes. And he was killed for it. Run over, several times to ensure his demise. Details about the Dotto ring are available online at http://www.rexresearch.com. His ideas on how our DNA is electrically controllable is fascinating. With this device you could theoretically live until you died of an accident. Once you reach about 40-something, well, let me put it differently, once your body reached 10 base pairs per turn, DNA lingo, you could use the device to sustain that state of being. Anything less than that and you begin to deteriorate, i.e. grow old. Now, if, perhaps, you could find the right setting, maybe you could be 25 forever. But who in the world wants that? There were reverse aging effects detected on his elderly patients. So this is where all that mess above comes from. It isn't claimed to just be theoretical. He, Dotto, witnessed it. Anyways, I have the document and have read it. Would be cool to build. The most expensive piece is the ring part. It is an alloy. But, it would cost about 13 grand to build, maybe less if you knew the right people. It might be worth it for immortality and a life free of cancer and AIDS and the common cold. Robert Bonner. IPMS, Thermal Electric Cooling Devices. The IN. Francevic Institute for Problems of Materials Science, IPMS, was established in Kiev, Ukraine in 1951. It operated in absolute secrecy and was totally unknown to the American intelligence community until just prior to the implosion of the Soviet Union in August of 1991. The mission of the Institute was to use whatever tools or means were necessary to know everything there is to know about materials. They had no production deadlines to contend with, and there was not a single applications engineer in the entire organization. The 6,600 scientists and technicians who worked in the institute developed an entirely new model of nonlinear quantum mechanics to describe the forces which make the world we live in behave as it does. This new model suggests that the material world is substantially different from the world described by the models relied on in the West. 7 new sciences, 27 new technologies, and 130 previously unknown materials developed in the Institute are based on the same revolutionary new model of quantum mechanics. Research and development in the deposition and culture of layered crystal lattices has produced an entirely new class of materials, previously unknown to Western science. These are referred to in recently submitted patent application documents as thermal electric cooling devices. Because of the nature and function of a specially designed combination of crystal layered hosts and their intercalated guest materials, these specially designed capacitors actually absorb energy when subjected to a flow of electrical current, producing a specific cooling effect on the material surfaces. All other known materials produce heat when subjected to the same conditions. Temperatures of 60 degrees Kelvin, minus 259 degrees Fahrenheit, have been produced under controlled, carefully documented laboratory conditions. This is cold enough to liquefy freestanding nitrogen gas from the atmosphere. The potential applications for this technology are manifold, but perhaps the most important is the potential it provides to totally eliminate any need for the use of compressed fluorocarbons of all types in refrigeration. Parallel applications in the telecommunications, computer and electronics industries have also been demonstrated to be highly effective and cost-efficient, particularly as they relate to the use of superconductive materials. Arrangements to commercialize these useful energy inventions by joint ventures of the IPMS and more than a dozen private sector companies have been repeatedly sabotaged by the U.S. governments, Defense Intelligence Agency and others. Source: David G. Ewirth, The Anthropos Files, Tales of Quantum Physics from Another World, 2nd edition, 2007. Bob Lands, Lands Water and Power System. 75-year-old retired chemist and engineer Bob Lance of Reno, Nevada, fought for the United States as a Navy pilot in World War II, but Monday the U.S. government is set to imprison him, to die in prison according to his public defenders, in an apparent scheme to suppress his new energy invention to replace nuclear and fossil fuel power. Perhaps paralleling the case of Horst Jesk, jailed for years in a bogus fraud conviction set up by wired funds transferred by Frederick Van Bedunken years after Jesk introduced him to Lance as a CIA agent, and the case of San Francisco investigative journalist George Williamson, who identified Bedunken from his research as a CIA operative previously involved in smuggling drugs into the U.S. via oil rigs in the Gulf. George Williamson was later named in a lawsuit by Mohammed Al-Fayed against the CIA and other government intelligence agencies regarding purported CIA documents Williamson offered to Al-Fayed, linking the agency with the death of Princess Diana. Lance reports Monday for a custody surrender hearing after his sentencing to 5 years imprisonment for a fraud in fact perpetrated without his knowledge by Norbert Vogler of Colorado, who forged investment certificates with Lance's signature notarized by his friend, who later acknowledged that Lance was not present when the forged signatures were notarized, one of 237 lies that Lance has documented by federal prosecutors in his trial after the government put him into poverty by illegally confiscating over $250,000 from him after a raid in 1994. Why would anyone want to put an old man in jail who is so scrupulously law-abiding that he never even got a speeding ticket, someone who accepted the government secrecy order suppressing the PAP air engine and therefore cancelled his contract to make PAP's prototype, someone who even calmly accepted the multimillion-dollar loss in business due to U.S. government denial of his permit application to export his water purification Sonofloc System 77 to the government of Egypt for seawater desalination? Could it be that powerful people within the U.S. government are implementing covert policies to keep new energy inventions suppressed that would threaten the fossil fuel and nuclear power industries? Copious evidence says yes, and that Lance's troubles really started after he began making new energy system prototypes for other inventors in 1977, culminating with his 1989 discovery of an over-unity energy generation system which combines his System 77 with an ultracentrifuge, so the overall device not only purifies any kind of water but also produces sufficient heat to produce megawatts of electricity without any fuel at all, perhaps by tapping the zero-point energy with a kind of device the U.S. Department of Energy in 1998 called the Holy Grail of energy research. How else could it be possible for this bogus fraud case to even be prosecuted after expiration of statute of limitations, with falsified evidence and the apparent collusion of prosecutors who lied and public defenders who refused to contest the lies and offer documentation of innocence? Why else would Bedunken have brought this gold certificate scheme to Lance as a funding mechanism for his invention? The Lance water and power system was first tested in 1989. It can solve our global energy and water quality problems. And what does he get for it? An unacceptable deal offered by prosecutors and pushed by 2 successive public defenders who each claimed he would die in jail unless he took the plea bargain, acknowledging guilt and forfeiting his assets. Over $100,000 of that confiscated was not even in his name, a raw deal which this war veteran refuses to accept. Are we to sit by and let this happen, or will concerned citizens and media bring his story out so he can get the legal help he needs to get his bogus conviction reversed, his name cleared and his money back so he can pursue development of his new energy system? There is a vault at the U.S. Patent Office containing 5,000 patents ordered secret by the government, confiscated from the inventors, who are threatened with 20 years in jail if they release the information as per dual-use secrecy law uncovered under Freedom of Information Act and reprinted on p. 162 of Jean Manning's book The Coming Energy Revolution. Her book provides overviews of various energy inventions. Isn't it about time we did something to take this situation under public investigation and control, especially motivated by the current Enron fiasco exemplifying the ethics of the fossil fuel industry and government complicity in rigging the energy industry? Dr. Timothy Trapp, 127 Energy Technologies. Dr. Timothy Trapp, Warren, Ohio, is president of the nonprofit company World Improvement. Technologies, WITS. A contact email for WITS is wits2011@yahoo.com. They also have another nonprofit organization called World Improvement Through the Spirit, WITS, Ministry. Dr. Trapp called Gary Vesperman June 24, July 1, and again on July 4, 2006 with accompanying emails to provide more details on the company's activities and suppression history. Currently employing 11 scientists, WITS has been active in producing, installing and servicing free energy systems worldwide for 19 years. Dr. Trapp and the two nonprofits have developed over 127 energy technologies. Approximately 20 utilize cracking water into oxygen and hydrogen, approximately 14 are gravity motors, approximately 50 are radiant energy machines, and the remaining are miscellaneous energy, propulsion and pollution remediation devices. 127 energy technologies are currently commercially available, including large-scale over-unity power plants 5 megawatts and up. Many of these power plants are under construction in foreign countries but not in the United States due to suppression by the U.S. government. WITS also makes and sells a device for $30 that can be added to any electrical system that has batteries, which would drastically increase the efficiency of that system, for example cell phone, radio, electric car. Dr. Trapp states that if governments were for this technology instead of against it, a home power generator the size of a desktop computer could be built and sold for about the same cost as fuel-powered generators or less. When Dr. Trapp moved back from Alaska, upon arrival, the shipping container containing his tools, equipment, etc., had been emptied. In spring 2001, Trapp's lab in Arizona was raided. At the end of 2001, 2 WITS scientist assistants were, and currently still are, in Ohio prison on trumped-up drug charges. In the past 20 years the U.S. government has destroyed over 14 WITS laboratories. As recently as spring 2006, a WITS laboratory burned to the ground. The contents of each laboratory contained millions of dollars worth of equipment and several costly free energy machines. Dr. Trapp's laboratories were raided, his equipment was smashed, and his people were beaten and arrested numerous times on false charges. False evidence was planted many times. After beating up one of his WITS salesmen, the salesman was then killed by driving the salesman's car off a cliff. Another WITS employee was also murdered by U.S. government and so-called law enforcement agents. There have been numerous attempts on the lives of Dr. Trapp as well as many of his associates. Dr. Trapp wrote, "This really should be a wake-up call to the people of America who believe we have religious freedom here. We don't, when it comes to anything that might help the little guy." Hi Gary. His name is Tim Trapp. Not entirely correct. His name is Dr. Timothy Trapp. Vesperman, he used to live in Alaska. He was the one who told me about Henry Ford working with John Keeley to create an arrangement inside early Model Ts so that magnets placed in them would make them self-running. The story goes that Ford was threatened by the oil companies for graft, kickbacks, or something along those lines, so he did this magnet trick as insurance. No one has yet come back with any proof of the claim that some Model Ts had these slots in the bell housing where magnets could be placed to make it self-running. Here is the file: http://www.keelynet.com/energy/ford.htm, Vesperman. This cannot be entirely true. John Keeley died in 1898. When Tim called me several years ago with that story, he said one of the cars had been found and the engine or a copy of it had been demonstrated, and the inventor killed on his drive home with the engine on a trailer. The engine was stolen. Tim also said he had some radical new power generator capable of 50 kilowatts, but he gave no details about it. This was back in 1997. See yet. Richard Diggs, Liquid Electricity Engine. Richard Diggs, Custom Invention Agency, P.O. Box 11, Carthage, Missouri 64836, patent process on hold, though he has over 200 others. Diggs developed at an inventor's workshop, IW International, his liquid electricity engine that he believed could power a large truck for 25,000 miles from a single portable unit of his electrical fuel. Liquid electricity violated a number of the well-known physical laws that the inventor pointed out. The inventor was also aware of the profound impact the invention could have upon the world's economy if it could be developed. David G. Ewert, reporter, Remediating Nuclear Waste Materials. Dear Mr. Tetreault, after reading your article in the Las Vegas Review-Journal entitled Nuclear Project Draws Interest, I thought it may be of interest to you to know that the DOE has played this game with university and privately funded laboratories for many years. Perhaps the most comprehensive review of this subject ever undertaken was prepared by Mr. Richard Champ, President of Nuclear Remediation Technologies, headquartered in Hyattsville, Maryland 301-559-5057. Beginning in 1997, NRT and its chief scientist S.X. Jin, once the highest-ranked particle physicist in the People's Republic of China, until he escaped to the U.S. in 1994 while addressing the Institute of New Energy Symposium in Salt Lake City, Utah, have been submitting critical laboratory documents to DOE, demonstrating the effectiveness of known technologies used to remediate radioactive emissions generated by nuclear fuel waste materials in both solid and liquid form. After being finessed into providing all the definitive laboratory data to Dr. Frank Goldner of DOE's Nuclear Remediation Division, then Secretary of DOE Spencer Abraham attempted to confiscate, classify, and impound NRT's technology while at the same time pretending to be considering providing grant money to support its continued development. The fact that the technology in question had already been awarded 6 patents K. Shoulders et.al. was the only thing that prevented him from succeeding. Instead of providing grant funding, Dr. Goldner was instructed to put an end to NRT's pursuit of DOE funding for the development and deployment of its technologies. And that is precisely what he did. During a conference call held on November 15, 2003, I was informed by Goldner that not only did DOE not intend to ever provide any funding to anyone for the purpose of remediating radioactive emissions in spent nuclear fuels, he insisted that it is and will continue to be DOE's policy for the next 40 years to encapsulate and bury every ounce of high-grade nuclear waste material stored in the U.S. underground at Yucca Mountain. Further, he told us that any attempt to obtain any high-level nuclear waste materials for testing by anyone, including government-funded laboratories, would be arrested and jailed without access to legal counsel under the Export Administration Act. I still don't know what the EAA has to do with remediating radioactive emissions, but that is what he said. In 1999, while Elliot Richardson was Secretary of DOE, NRT was awarded a discretionary grant of $2 million for the purpose of advancing its test schedule. The work was to have been undertaken in concert with Dr. George Miley, physicist in residence at the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana. Dr. Miley's laboratory at the Champaign-Urbana campus was Level 2 accredited by DOE, and was therefore acceptable as a test and development site. However, within less than 90 days after the announcement of the grant had been published, pressure from within the department rose to such extraordinary levels that Secretary Richardson was forced to withdraw the grant, albeit grudgingly. The only similar technology ever contemporaneously developed in the U.S. for the remediation of radioactive emissions in high-grade nuclear waste materials was developed in the late 1990s by Dr. Paul Brown and his colleagues at World Atomics in Colorado Springs, Colorado. After being granted several patents for the nuclear spallation device he designed, Brown contracted with several Japanese contractors to build 3 successively powerful prototype versions of his device. He had them built in Japan because DOE actively intervened more than a dozen times to prevent U.S. companies from building it. The problem with Brown's device was that it was little more than a small, semi-controlled nuclear fission-powered device designed to continuously bombard nuclear waste material targets with a highly charged gamma-ray field. Because it was so dangerous to operate, Brown was never able to obtain the necessary State Department or UN transport clearances to have it shipped across international waters into the US for further testing and development. As you may recall, Dr. Brown was killed shortly thereafter under the most questionable of circumstances, just as the utility of his nuclear spallation technique was about to be publicly demonstrated in Japan. Only a month before he died, Dr. Brown met with me, Gary Vesperman, and a few of my business and science associates in Henderson, Nevada to present his method of neutralizing radioactive waste. His method is number 13 in my list of methods of neutralizing or disposing of radioactive waste in http://3c.de/docs/gvcomparison.htm. A few weeks after Brown's suspicious fatal car accident, Art Rosenblum also died in a car accident. Rosenblum had been enthusiastically promoting Randall Mills Blacklight Power Inc.'s energy source. We have known how to safely remediate radioactive emissions from spent nuclear fuels, both liquid and solid, for nearly a decade. We have the test data and prototype apparatus to prove it. That data, including all the protocols, policies, procedures and experimental design criteria associated with our work have been submitted to DOE many times over. Dick Champ can tell you all about it if you want to go to the trouble to ask him, with the net result that DOE will not allow the U.S. Postal Service to deliver our proposals any longer. If you want to see what is really going on with nuclear remediation, this is a very good place to begin. Paul Brown, Hypercap E-converter. Paul Brown, Ph.D., had invented this device which Gary Vesperman wrote up for his Advanced Technologies for Foreign Resort project, http://www.isstuff.com/energy21/advantech.htm right parenthesis. Perpetual battery. The Hypercap E-converter is a thick quarter-sized battery which would put out 0.001 watt forever for such applications as critical components inside fail-safe computers, cellular telephones, etc. The energy comes from tapping ether fluctuations. The following is excerpted with permission from inventor Paul Brown's Nightmare Story, Electrifying Times, Volume 10, Number 1, www.electrifyingtimes.com. His story originally appeared in Gene Manning's book The Coming Energy Revolution, www.genemanning.com. Brown invented a novel method for converting natural radioactive decay material into electricity in the form of a battery. In February 1987, the proud inventor and his associates at a private research company in Boise, Idaho, decided it was time to make a public announcement of his discovery. A series of traumatic events followed. The Idaho State Departments of Health and Finance filed complaints against both the company and Brown. His license for handling radioactive materials was suspended. He began to receive anonymous threats, such as "We will bulldoze your home with your family in it." Relocating the company to Portland, Oregon, did not stop the troubles. Despite the fact that a 1988 Fortune magazine article commented favorably on the nuclear battery venture, securities fraud charges were filed against Brown and his company. Oregon's Finance Department investigated, as did the Internal Revenue Service and the Securities and Exchange Commission. After meeting each challenge, Brown redoubled his efforts to develop his technology, but events worsened. His young wife was assaulted. Even in their home they did not feel safe. It was robbed 3 times and vandalized on 4 other occasions. Brown was accused of drug manufacturing and eventually lost control of his company. The Browns also lost their home. Finally, the pipe bombing of his mother's car in the early 1990s drove Brown to become a recluse. "I understand now why inventors drop out of society," he said in a 1991 open letter to other new energy researchers. His advice to them: keep a low profile until you have completed your endeavor, be selective in choosing your business partners, protect yourself and your family, and know that the nightmare stories are true. Brown eventually died in a suspicious car accident in April 2002. Ira Einhorn, free energy and mind control researcher. What Geller could do, I saw a lot of it firsthand, indicated that the basic physical framework in which physics operated was inadequate, and that so-called free energy devices that would solve our energy problem and end what is now called global warming and allow for the decentralization of most economic activities, could become a reality. Hence I circulated all previously known anti-gravity information and all the emerging work on free energy devices. Unfortunately, all new technology can be used as weaponry as well as for human benefit. So, I was soon up to my ears in a multi-pronged intelligence game that is still waiting to be unraveled. So when the opportunity arose, after a series of dinners and meetings in Princeton and New York with Bogdan Malik, the head of Migma Fusion, the only private nuclear fusion research operation in the United States, and a number of Yugoslavian government officials, I agreed to help organize a large Tesla celebration. To this end, I enlisted the support of the president of the prestigious Franklin Institute in Philadelphia, Bowen Dees, and after a stint at Harvard and with the blessing of the Yugoslavian Consul General in New York, I went off to Yugoslavia, to spend days at their expense, as an unofficial ambassador. I was planning to do many things during this celebratory conference that would have linked the Tesla Museum in Beograd with the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia, besides giving Tesla his just due and showcasing his achievements in a major exhibit at the Franklin Institute. While holding a major international conference on his works, I would also have organized a smaller conference on the suppressed aspects of his work in mind control and free energy, and found a way to directly demonstrate mind control to those who came to the conference. In the fall of 1978 I was a fellow in residence at the Institute of Politics within the Kennedy School at Harvard. I taught one course, ran a small lunchtime chat series in which Harvard luminaries, Ambassador Reichauer, E.D. Wilson and Carl Deutsch, among others, ate and chatted with 5 or 6 of us for a couple of hours. I lectured in every conceivable venue at Harvard, conducted a number of public symposiums, brought a number of the members of my network to Harvard to lecture, ate dinner with a host of well-known political figures, and made an inordinate amount of noise about mind control technology and the Russian woodpecker too, among others, then CIA head Stansfield Turner. This led to a meeting in the Boston airport, arranged by one of JFK's chief aides, on the matter with a top defense intelligence scientist who ended up spending the evening with me and giving me his home telephone number. In 1979 I received a small private foundation grant to study free energy devices in preparation for a large involvement in such activities. I was planning to visit all of the inventors personally and then prepare a report that would have formed the basis of a venture capital enterprise that had been encouraged, due to some of my mailings, by a number of my affluent friends. The objective was to develop and bring one device to the marketplace. All was not to be. I was busted for a murder I did not commit, and all my work on mind control and free energy became history. Signed Ira Einhorn, September 1, 2002. The following is excerpted from Ira Einhorn's July 5, 2002 email. Robert Ehringer proposed all kinds of book schemes for me, schemes in which I was not interested. Nor did I find any of the people my agent sent to me, the biography, to be of interest. Thus when Ehringer suggested he would like to look at my 4th novel, Cantor Dust, which was near and dear to my heart, I informed my agent and sent it to him. Ehringer was very enthusiastic about it. He said he would prefer to do my autobiography, but would work on getting my novel published as an opener to getting my autobiography. I said he was welcome to try. Thus began a continuous stream of many hundreds of emails between this alleged intelligence operative and myself, broken only by his journeys to England, wherein he told me he saw a number of publishers without success and one new house that agreed to publish Cantor Dust when they were actually in business, and his family vacations. We were still at it the day I was extradited to the United States, July 20, 2001. Deleted. One of Robert Ehringer's closest associates is Claire E. George, past Deputy Director of Operations for the CIA, in charge of covert operations for the entire planet. Sources who have researched the situation indicate that Claire E. George and Robert Ehringer have worked together on a number of operations, still work together and have a pile of money at their disposal. Einhorn presents the highlights of his case in http://groups.yahoo.com/group/ira-einhorn/message/454. We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false. William Casey, CIA Director, from First Staff Meeting, 1981, source, The Brother Jonathan Gazette Daily Digest Wednesday, June 28, 2006. How much is good press worth? To the Bush administration, about $1.6 billion. That's how much 7 federal departments spent from 2003 through the second quarter of 2005 on 343 contracts with public relations firms, advertising agencies, media organizations and individuals. Washington Post, February 14, 2006, source, http://www.washingtonpost.com/wpdn/content/article/20060213018997.html?NAV=HC module right Thomas Henry Moray, Radiant Energy Pump/Electricity Generator. Thomas Henry Moray, Ph.D., August 28, 1892, May, 1974, was an inventor from Salt Lake City, Utah. Moray graduated from the Latter-day Saints Business College. Moray studied electrical engineering through an international correspondence school course. He received a Ph.D. in electrical engineering from the University of Uppsala. T. Henry Moray's research dates from the time he was 9 years old, 1901. Over the 73 years of Moray's research, he left behind him a wealth of notes, not only pertaining to radiant energy, but a wide range of scientific research bordering all the way from the devulcanization of rubber, the influence of mineral reactions in the presence of high energy, bioelectronic effects, electrotherapy, sound pickup, solid-state physics, and finally the detection of energy that constituted the major endeavor of his work. Moray was a pioneer in the field of electrical energy. As a youth he greatly admired Nikola Tesla and in particular was very interested in Tesla's obsession with the Earth having a limitless supply of energy available to it from the universe. Like Tesla, Moray wanted to find out how to tap this energy. Like a lot of people he became amazed at the crystal radio, where a crystal can be tapped with a fine wire to make a radio work without any battery or power. Moray figured that if this was possible, it should be possible to find a crystal, or magnetic rock, that could be tapped for a power source. Moray became very interested in the properties of certain rocks and crystal structures and the powders from them. He actually developed and utilized a transistor more than 20 years before anyone ever dreamed of such things. These solid materials are what he made his so-called Moray valves out of. They were like radio valves but were not using a heated coil like radio valves, also known as vacuum tubes in today's terminology. They were all cold with no external power to feed them. They were a mixture of semi-conducting materials and intricate one-way conducting materials, diodes in today's terminology. The Moray valve was therefore a solid-state device unlike a radio valve that heated a plate to produce energy. It is well documented that Moray developed a bipolar semiconductor as early as 1927. His germanium valve was working in 1931. In the 1930s Moray developed advanced semiconductors and transistor-like devices. Moray provided a complete disclosure of his semiconductor research to Dr. Harvey Fletcher of the Bell Laboratories. Dr. Fletcher later became head of the department at Bell Laboratories that developed the transistor. Moray, therefore, could be the true father of modern electronics since his work predated the Bell Laboratory bipolar transistor findings by at least 20 years. During the 1930s T. Henry Moray was refused a patent on his cold semiconductor cathode because the patent examiner couldn't understand how it could emit electrons. The patent examiner reported that he could not allow the patent because he could not see how it would work since the cathode had no means of being heated. He tried to patent his device, but the requests were denied because the item he called the Moray valve was too new a thought for the patent examiner. It was actually a germanium transistor, and solid states were unknown at the time. His son John Moray said. 20 years later, the development of the transistor apparently proved that his device could actually have worked. Both Nikola Tesla and Thomas Henry Moray consider harnessing cosmic energy, vacuum or zero-point energy in today's terminology, as the most practical method of producing energy yet discovered by man. Furthermore, they thought it is possible to utilize this vast source of energy from the universe without a prime mover at any point on the Earth or in space, on the ground, in the air, on the water, under the water, or even underground. Radiant energy is energy that is transported by waves. This includes energy transmission in the form of waves through space or various media. Radiant energy is also energy transferred through electromagnetic waves. Solar energy is a type of radiant energy. Radiant energy is the sum total of all the energy that comes to the Earth from all the universe. The Earth also reflects back radiant energy into the universe. Our Sun directs electrically charged particles towards us. Radiant energy may be calculated by integrating or summing radiant power with respect to time. Radiant energy is usually expressed in joules. During the 1920s, Moray demonstrated a radiant energy device to many people who were unable to find a hidden power supply or batteries. Moray called his device a solid-state detector, or the Moray valve. It basically comprised of a large antenna connected to a complex series of high-voltage capacitors, transformers, and semiconductors. By supposedly stimulating the existing oscillations of radiant energy from space, his device could generate electrical power without any man-made power input. By 1936, Moray had eventually engineered his device so that a 55 kg version could constantly produce 50 kilowatts of power for several days. An electrical generator may be considered as not in the true sense a generator, as electricity is not made by the generator but is merely an electrical pump. Moray's radiant energy device may then be referred to as a cosmic ray pump, that is, a high-speed electron oscillator serving as a detector of cosmic radiations which causes a pumping action or surging within its circuitry. Moray used the term radiant energy to describe that source of energy coming from the cosmos to Earth and radiating from the Earth back to where it came. This is the energy the Moray device captures and could be described as those particles of energy pervading all space. What sort of an apparatus is Moray's radiant energy device? Briefly, it would appear to be similar to a radio receiving set of power proportions. An antenna is connected to a 29-stage solid-state collector material, a small rounded pellet mixture of triboluminescent zinc, a semiconductor material, a radioactive or fissile material, and germanium. The device contains 2 coils of wire, or inductances. It also contains several condensers, or capacitors, of different sizes. There is a detector tube, or electronic valve, and 2 oscillator tubes. Added to this is a bar of silver and a bar of copper, a starting device, and a step-down electrical transformer, reported to be 1000 to 1, primary to secondary. After tuning of the device, the semiconductor material acts as a one-way gate, diode in modern terminology, for surges of high-frequency background atomic ion energy which can go through the material more readily in one direction than the other. For conversion of ionic to electromagnetic energy to then be transformed into useful electrical power by conventional radio circuitry and a transformer, the device must be grounded. All of this was enclosed in a box measuring about 30 inches long by 16 inches wide by 16 inches high. It weighed about 30 kilograms. There were no moving parts. Moray said there are no dangerous radiations surrounding the box when it is in operation. Moray's 30-kilogram radiant energy device produced 4 kilowatts of cold electricity which was able to power light bulbs. However, electric motors require special winding to increase their efficiency. While commercially available electric motors will operate on the power from a radiant energy device, they are not as efficient as motors running on ordinary commercial currents. Moray says when his motors are running in the dark they glow with a violet aura. His motors ran cold. It has been estimated that using current dielectric technology that a 50 kg radiant energy device could be built to produce 300 kilowatts sufficient to power buildings and also electric vehicles. Some persons who have seen radiant energy power lights say the bulbs look as if they were filled entirely with white light, as if the gas itself which fill the bulbs were fully incandescent. Moray believes this to be true. Radiant energy will heat electric flat irons and other electrical heating devices. It is claimed heating capacities are reached much more quickly with radiant energy than with commercial currents, and are considerably hotter than when powered with ordinary electric energy. One photograph shows Moray demonstrating his generator as it powers 5100-watt light bulbs and a 655-watt hotpoint iron. Thus he proved that his radiant energy device was not running off batteries as his detractors said it did. By 1936 he had developed a generating unit that weighed about 55 pounds and was capable of producing as much as 50 kilowatts of power on a steady basis. On several hundred occasions Dr. Moray lighted a bank of 35 light bulbs with power from his simple but ingenious radiant energy device. There were 21 50-watt bulbs on the panel. At the same time the generator powered a 600-watt glow heater and a 575-watt flat iron. Moray, as Nikola Tesla before him, was unsuccessful in introducing his devices working on this principle. Some report that his secret was forgotten. Moray tried for several patents to no avail. These valves are one reason why patents were continually refused, as he was told there is no such thing as free energy. You must put energy in to get it out. As patents were applied for, there were refusals due to the fact that the patent applied for infringed other patents. Even though Moray patiently wrote details of how this could not be, the U.S. Patent Office refused to allow any. On the other hand, Moray gradually had perfected his device's output from a capacity to light one small incandescent light bulb to a present capacity claimed to be 50 kilowatts. 50 kilowatts represents about 67 horsepower and, certainly, 67 horsepower is not to be disregarded. Many small factories do not use as much as 67 horsepower. According to Moray, one of his radiant energy devices can be built for about $800. Year is unknown as there has been considerable inflation. Mass production methods might cut this price in half. Under these circumstances, a unit in a home would bring about a substantial saving in power bills over several years' time. As many as 100 persons have witnessed radiant energy demonstrations. Radiant energy, as it emerges from the Moray apparatus, may be considered a form of electricity. It is an alternating current, but an alternating current of very high frequency. If a photograph of a single bulb lighted with radiant energy is taken, the print shows a large, dark ring, perpendicular to the base of the bulb. This ring looks like a circle of translucent black fog. It seems the light somehow reflects itself on the air, or projects a shadow of itself there. The demonstrations attracted newspapers and scientists from Bell Laboratories and from the Department of Agriculture, but none could attest to how the device actually operated, nor could evidence of fraud be found. Even though eminent scientists examined his device during and after its operation, and admitted that they could not understand the source of the power they had witnessed, still he was never able to gain their support for his work. Moray refused to sell his technology to corporate interests, fearing its misuse. In the later 1930s, engineers from the Rural Electrification Administration, REA, were ordered to work with him by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. A controversy grew between the inventor and the government engineers. As a result, Dr. Moray charged that the REA was trying to sabotage his work. Moray reported that he and his family had been threatened and shot at on several occasions. His laboratory was ransacked to stop his research and public demonstrations. Repeated assassination attempts were made against his life. It was necessary for him to bulletproof his automobile since he was shot at while driving down the public street. Small wonder that Moray developed an extremely alert and suspicious nature, and visitors to his desk often noticed a fully loaded pistol lying on the desktop within easy reach of his hand. In 1940 Murray demonstrated before the members of the Public Utilities Commission, in Utah, his free energy generator. It maintained a continuous output of 250,000 volts with no apparent input. The next day Murray was found shot in his lab, and all of his notes were stolen. Murray had been wounded by shotgun pellets in his lab by an attempt to frighten him into handing over the secrets of his work. Except for his own skill with a pistol to successfully defend himself against his assailants, Murray would have been murdered. An REA engineer named Felix Fraser, who was Murray's assistant, had gone berserk and smashed the Murray device with an axe. It was never rebuilt. The frustrated inventor could not afford to duplicate his invention. He went to his grave many years later convinced that the destruction of his device was part of a communist plot. Fraser apparently was angered that Murray would not sell his device to corporate interests. There is a rumor that to stop the USSR getting this technology, the equipment was destroyed by Murray's assistant. Or, the equipment was destroyed because Murray refused to unconditionally hand over all aspects of the devices he had built. It was further claimed that one of his sons dumped the entire contents of Murray's laboratory into a river because of continued threats and harassment not only to himself but to his family as well. The entire truth may never be known, but it is a fact that Fraser became enraged and grabbed a sledgehammer and smashed Dr. Murray's device to pieces. Dad believed to his dying day it was all part of a communist plot, John Murray said. He had refused to cooperate with certain known communists, so his invention paid the price, Murray added. It certainly smacks of some kind of conspiracy, the younger Murray mused. The tragedy of it all was in the fact that Dr. Murray's years of research and development, and his entire fortune were wiped out when his device was smashed with a sledgehammer. It had taken Murray 20 years and $200,000 of his own money to develop it. Because of the expense and hardship in rebuilding the generator, which the patent office had refused to consider, my father never actually completed more than one unit at a time as he perfected it. Each updated model used parts from the previous model as he made improvements in successive stages. Another factor in the total destruction of this marvelous technology was the demise of the various companies that provided Dr. Murray with components. Both the Great Western Radio Co. and the Baldwin Electric Co., which he worked with, vanished as part of his resources. Inflation, the massive war effort, and threats to my father's life spelled doom to any ideas he may have had for replacing the destroyed generator device, the younger Murray claimed. However, more than $200,000 in the late 1920s and early 1930s would indeed translate into many millions today. Make no mistake about it, Dr. Murray did what he claimed to have done. He had achieved free energy. The Soviet Union even offered to provide him his own fully equipped laboratory in Russia, with no expense spared, and to back his experiments fully. Fraser could have been a trained Soviet agent who had succeeded in working his way into Murray's confidence and gaining access to Murray's laboratory as a technician and assistant. When Murray still refused to give his invention and services to the Soviet Union, the assistant destroyed the device, smashing it to pieces with a sledgehammer. Sadly, T. Henry Murray died with his dream unrealized and the original device destroyed. Walter Rosenthal, reporter, Small Electrical Power Converter. Walter Rosenthal was a retired aerospace engineer with some test equipment such as oscilloscope and voltmeters. He had closely followed for a long time development of new sources of energy and personally knew some energy inventors. Rosenthal recently passed on from natural causes. He received much praise for his careful energy invention measurements. See for example Thomas E. Bearden's eulogy in http://index.php/site:/lrp:/tom_Bearden_Tom_Walter_Floyd_Sweet. More than 20 years ago, Rosenthal became involved with an inventor's invention of a small electrical power converter. Something about converting a flashlight battery's DC to 4 watts of power with a high conversion gain. He realizes now that it would be a very valuable invention because it could be used in cell phones, laptop computers, portable radios, etc. Then the inventor got a call from a man representing Atlantic Richfield, now Arco. They offered the inventor $40,000 to take it off the market. Otherwise, they would subject him to troubles, etc. He refused. They eventually offered $400,000. One day he came home to find a group of men going through his apartment. He asked them to leave, and has had no further confrontations. He has not done any further development work on this device. Perhaps consequently, as of a few months ago, he was still alive and well. That energy device is still not on the market. Later on, Rosenthal figured out that the Atlantic Richfield people could only have known details about the invention by tapping either his or the inventor's telephone. Joseph C. Yater, heat-to-electricity converter. In September 18, 1975, Joseph C. Yater invented a heat-to-electricity converter that he says will cost the consumer approximately $200 and would be up to 90% efficient. The device operates by capturing fluctuation voltage, the static noise heard on radios and amplifiers. The rooftop device would be heated by the sun and use millions of microcircuits to tap the freed electrons from heated molecules. Yater took his device to the U.S. government, which declared that his device had real potential. After promising him a working model within 6 months, the U.S. government came back to him with the reply that the device would be impractical. Subsequent scientific analysis also revealed flaws in Yater's reasoning. Adam Trombley, Trombley-Kahn closed-path homopolar generator. During the early 1980s, Adam Trombley and Joseph Kahn, Ph.D., co-invented the Trombley-Kahn closed-path homopolar generator, which has an output power exceeding its power input by a factor of 4.92. The patent application and drawings represent the result of the expenditure of $290,000 in 2 phases. Their U.S. patent application was rejected twice on the grounds of impossibility that the machine could work. Then the United States Patent Office notified the Department of Defense. Instead of congratulations, Trombley and Kahn received a secrecy order. The 2 authors were warned not to publish any information on the basis of violation of secret homopolar generator work being done concurrently in the U.S. government's Department of Defense. Adam Trombley, the senior designer of the machine, received 2 written gag orders from the Department of Defense forbidding him to reveal details of the machine upon threat of 10 years imprisonment for violating security relating to homopolar generator design. The imposed secrecy has prevented any recompense whatsoever from accruing to the men who performed this work. According to information obtained under the Freedom of Information Act by the Federation of American Scientists, the Pentagon placed 774 patent applications under secrecy orders in 1991, up from 290 in 1979, and 506 of these orders were imposed on inventions by private companies. The U.S. government has standing gag orders on several thousand inventions. In 1989, Adam Trombley proposed the retrofitting of the Four Corners coal-fired power plant with an advanced Trombley-Kahn closed-path homopolar motor generator. Trombley and Farnsworth estimated that the cost of such an advanced electrical generator to be approximately the cost of installing smoke scrubbers on one coal-fired generating unit. Sources: http://www.rexresearch.com/Trombley/Trombley.htm and http://www.broandrew.com/suppression.html. Adam Trombley, Trombley Farnsworth. Solid-state oscillating M system. Adam Trombley also co-invented with David Farnsworth the Trombley-Farnsworth solid-state oscillating electromagnetic M system. In June of 1989, Adam Trombley and David Farnsworth of 0 Point Technologies, demonstrated a solid-state resonant device which physically produced over 50 times greater electrical output than input at the Church of the Holy Covenant just prior to a major address by Trombley at Dag Hammarskjöld Auditorium in the United Nations. The demonstration had originally been scheduled to coincide with Trombley's address. But at the last minute, Trombley and Farnsworth were informed by the director of the United Nations Environment Program, Noel Brown, that United Nations security personnel refused to allow the demonstration in the auditorium for security reasons. The Church of the Holy Covenant was no longer used as a church but was used by the United Nations as an alternate venue for the demonstration of sensitive technologies such as that belonging to Trombley and Farnsworth. The demonstration was attended by 50 people including 5 major Wall Street executives, several engineers, and a senior engineer from Boeing Corporation, Dr. Charles, Chuck, Clark. Clark had been allowed to spend several hours alone with the technology prior to the New York demonstration. Clark had checked for every conceivable trick that might be used to deceive naive or unwitting observers. The demonstration went perfectly. Many present stated that they felt they had attended a historical event, one that would help the human species emerge from the economically stratified and earth-destroying dark ages of fossil fuel technology and into a time of universal, pollution-free electrical power. Some participants/observers were moved to tears by the ramifications of what they had witnessed. After the demonstration, the entire entourage proceeded to Dag Hammarskjöld Auditorium where Trombley addressed the standing room-only crowd. He asked all of the witnesses to stand, and they did. He then asked Dr. Clark to comment on what he had seen. Chuck said, "I am not here representing Boeing. I am here because I was hired to find out if this technology really works. I can't tell you how this thing works. David and Adam can explain that better than me. What I can tell you is that it does work exactly as Adam has just said. I have checked for every trick in the book, and all I can say is that this works." There was a stunned air in the room. When Trombley finished, there was a long-standing ovation which was followed by a very long walk from the front of the auditorium to the entry foyer. One senior diplomat called it one of the longest standing ovations in the history of the UN. There were just so many people from all over the world expressing their excitement that it took nearly 45 minutes for Adam to get through. By the time he reached the foyer, he saw the 5 Wall Street executives were huddled up with a man whom Adam had introduced the day before as one of his best friends. They looked anything but happy. As Adam approached, one of them took him aside and said, "Your friend just told us that you faked the demonstration. Is that true? Are you kidding? My entire life has led up to this moment. The future of this planet will depend on the development and deployment of these technologies if we are to have any hope of surviving the hell we are currently creating for ourselves." Adam was stunned. I do not know what his motivation is for saying that. He is not a scientist nor is he an engineer. It just doesn't make any sense. Well, you said he was one of your best friends. So you have to understand that our commitment of $500 million is withdrawn until we can sort this out. In an instant, one man had obstructed history for us all. He misrepresented the truth even after the real professionals had agreed that the technology worked, and that there were no tricks. Adam later realized that this individual had cleverly infiltrated his life and won his confidence. He had torpedoed the future. Adam did hours of interviews that afternoon and into the evening. Dr. John Lilly also asked to be interviewed. He said, "This is the most wonderful and exciting thing I have ever seen. I am coming out of retirement to help Adam promote this thing. Maybe we do have a future that's worth living in after all." The following Monday, Trombley and Farnsworth presented a similar demonstration to some congressional representatives in the U.S. Senate Banking and Finance Committee hearing room. After the congressional demonstration, Trombley commented, "Here is a technology that points to a better future, a future free of the taint that the politics of scarcity casts upon us all." After these demonstrations, Trombley indicated that he had so far survived 47 assassination attempts over this technology, which apparently threatens existing energy industry monopolies. While David Farnsworth was in their $20 million Oregon shop/lab, early one March morning in 1994, badge-wearing U.S. Marshals broke in with sledgehammers and chainsaws. Farnsworth watched with his wife and a friend from a motorhome while they ransacked his lab and took the energy machines away. They recklessly removed expensive electrical devices including expensive spectrum analyzers, earthquake forecasting devices and advanced generating equipment away from walls and shelves. They carelessly stacked them in waiting trucks and vans to be transported to a federal warehouse in North Portland. The supposedly law-abiding U.S. government employees also took home thousands of dollars of Farnsworth's expensive ham radio equipment. The U.S. Marshals then filed charges against David Farnsworth and took him to court. Eventually, those charges were dropped. Adam Trombley has had a total of 54 attempts on his life. One of the latest occurred early in 2006. Also, a suspicious incident occurred July 4, 2006 when Trombley was visited at his Aspen, Colorado home by a man of Middle East origin from Las Vegas who knocked on his door and earnestly tried to give him 10 free cases of meat. Having been previously forewarned, Trombley refused, even after an additional offer of a free freezer, fearing the meat had been poisoned. This incident indicates that an energy invention suppression hit squad might be based in Las Vegas. References: June-December 2006 emails by Adam Trombley and Bruce Mellon to Gary Vesperman. In Search of Quantum Motors and Generators by Bruce Mellon, Electrifying Times. Spring-Summer 2006, Volume 10, Number 1, www.electrifyingtimes.com. The book The Coming Energy Revolution by Gene Manning. Tom Bearden's website www.cheniere.org/correspondence/080301.htm. Gary Vesperman, My car was firebombed July 3, 2006. John Martins and I share the rent on a house in a nice, relatively crime-free neighborhood in Henderson, Nevada. The evening of July 3, John rode home on his bicycle at 9:45 p.m. The streets were quiet with no one walking in our neighborhood. He left on his bicycle 15 minutes later in a different direction. He still sees no people around. He does recall having a spooky feeling that someone was watching him leave and looked back a couple of times as he was riding away. At 10:15 p.m. I went to bed and shut off my bedroom light, which can be seen from the street. A few minutes later John's dog Coyote started barking. I let her bark for a couple of minutes hoping she will stop. I got up, looked out the front door, and could see what appeared to be fireworks burning in the street behind the car. I walked to the car, looked in the rear window, and saw the bottom of the back of the driver's seat burning. I ran back into the house, called 911, and reported my car on fire. The firemen came later than I thought they would and with an iron bar proceeded to break all 4 door windows, even the 2 small windows in the 2 rear doors. I had jangled the car keys in front of them when they had arrived. They then found that the driver's side door was unlocked and sprayed water on the burning driver's seat to put out the fire. They told me to wait for their arson investigator. He found on the driver's seat the carcass of an incendiary firebomb 3 inches long and an inch wide. He said it burns at 2000 degrees. The next day, being July 4th, I asked 2 fireworks sales stands about it. It is illegal in Clark County where Las Vegas is located. It can be bought at Indian reservations 50 miles north. It appears whoever threw the firebomb in my car knew what he or she was doing. I asked my mailman who has been delivering mail in my upscale neighborhood for over 10 years. He said he has never seen a car torched in our neighborhood during all those years. My car is only one of numerous vehicles parked in our neighborhood. Yet my car, which is registered in my name, was the one targeted. The car is a 1991 Chevrolet Corsica which had been painted, its interior in good shape, and has a fuel-efficient strong powertrain with new tires and many new parts such as new brakes, muffler, etc. It would have been a nice high-mileage reliable car for several years. In addition to the firemen breaking all the door windows, the roof lining burned and there are other burns and melted plastic parts. The interior is a mess. John is a certified auto mechanic and had spent many hours restoring it. John and I eventually had the car towed away to a junkyard as a heartbreaking loss. Adam Trombley has had a total of 54 attempts on his life. One of the latest occurred early in 2006. Also, a suspicious incident occurred July 4, the day after my Corsica was firebombed, when Trombley was visited at his Aspen, Colorado home by a man of Middle Eastern origin who knocked on his door and earnestly tried to give him 10 free cases of meat. Having been previously forewarned, Trombley refused, fearing the meat had been poisoned. The man became upset and even tried to add a free freezer. He then gave up and told Trombley he had to get back to Las Vegas. A few minutes later, Trombley took a walk and found the man sitting on a sidewalk curb talking on his cell phone. Trombley's report hints that an energy invention suppression hit squad might be based in Las Vegas. One of my energy inventor friends, who himself has been a target of energy invention suppression, happened to visit me a few weeks later. He has emailed what I witnessed at Gary's house was no teenage prank. It was obviously intended to totally destroy a car, not just scratch the paint or leave a scar. With several other cars parked at the same house, Gary's was obviously targeted, not just the easiest to reach. 3 weeks before my car's firebombing, I had published on the internet the third version of this compilation of energy invention suppression cases, which can be read in www.byronwine.com, do find for Vesperman. Other sites can be found by entering in the dogpile.com search engine Vesperman suppression. So it may be that the energy invention suppression terrorists, possibly based here in Las Vegas, had retaliated by firebombing my car. I don't feel intimidated at all. In fact, I am mad and more determined than ever to help end energy invention suppression.